Rewatching anime and rereading manga is something I often tend to do on a massively irregular basis. Most of the time it's because there's a sequel airing that season and I don't quite remember what happened in the previous season. However, I always find myself rewatching 3 series all the time, and I want to talk about one of them. My name is the Black Kai, and this video is about Code Geass. Code Geass was released in an era where people were starting to get into anime. Its mecha concept was different to what people were used to, even with Evangelion and the Gundam franchises being out at the time. But there was one series that was compared to the most during its run, and you'll hear me reference it a lot. That series was Death Note. The similarities between the two series are quite interesting, you'll come to find. During this video, I'm going to break down certain aspects of the series and talk about some highlights. Before I get started, I do want to say that there will be a lot of spoilers in this video, so I highly recommend you stay warned. Let's get started. So to explain the plot of the show, it follows the long and treacherous war between the Britannians, who have basically colonized most of the world, and the Japanese, now living as the 11s under the Britannians' rules. Our main character Lelouch V. Britannia is an exiled prince from Britannia, and lives now as the Japanese Lelouch Lamperouge. He doesn't feel as excited about the war as any other Japanese person does, including the rebellion team trying to go against it. One day, after being separated from his friend and running away from Britannian soldiers, he finds himself in a position that's tough to get out of, when a strange-looking girl grants him a mysterious power that allows anyone to obey his command. He uses this to form a rebellion to overthrow the Britannian Empire. The first thing I wanted to talk about are the characters. Lelouch isn't written to be a hero. He isn't written in the role of a villain either. However, in this sense, he plays the role of one. His main goal is to overthrow the Britannian Empire to make a better life for his sister. This immediately sets him apart from Light Yagami, as Light sacrificed everyone and anyone he could just to accomplish his goals, whereas Lelouch used these goals to save these people. Lelouch has many relationships that contribute to this humane side of him, and that's what keeps him sane. His Geass powers do drive him to certain points, but never that bad. His guise as the anti-hero Zero, leading his rebellion team the Black Knights, is nothing short of fantastic. Next we have Lelouch's childhood best friend and enemy in the current time, Suzaku Kururugi. Suzaku has a knightly personality and always does his best for the greater good of humanity. Despite being Japanese, he works as a knight for the Britannian Empire, serving as an honorary soldier. He works hard to protect his friends, Lelouch and his sister Nanali especially, but also works harder to stop the threat of Zero without knowing the identity of him. The supporting characters and villains are brilliant. Lelouch's friends are oblivious to the Zero side of him and are always out to help any way they can. His sister Nanali is the sweetest thing, and despite being traumatized from her mother's death and the events that transpired to move them into the Japanese area, she still wants the best for her brother. The antagonists to Lelouch, the series' villains, are beautifully written to match Lelouch's intelligence or not. Most of the villains are comprised of Lelouch's family in the Britannian Empire, but there are the other few, such as Mao or Rolo, who make the story a lot more intense. This is one show where I can completely recommend to anyone the English or Japanese versions without doubt. The music is composed by Kotaro Nakagawa, who you might know composed the soundtracks to the Prison School and Hayate the Combat Butler soundtracks. The music flows through each scene, and it feels like you're immersed in the world while listening to it. Nakagawa designed each song to feel like an intense chess match, and you honestly do feel like it. Not to mention that Code Geass' first opening happens to be my favorite opening of all time. The bands that perform the opening and ending themes are brilliant by any standards and do a fantastic job of adding to the ambience of the show. There are certain parts in the story that certainly hit different while watching them, and those aren't quite the action scenes but the death ones. This particular section is going into major spoiler territory, so if you haven't seen past episode 1 of Code Geass, I don't recommend you watch any further. With that being said, I'd like to talk about 3 of my favorite scenes from the show. The first scene I want to talk about is the scene that shocked many anime fans worldwide. This was the mass murder of Japanese people by Lelouch's half-sister Euphemia. After opening up a certain section of Britannia to the Japanese, Lelouch, or Zero, admits defeat to his half-sister Euphemia Lee Britannia. He thereafter explains that anyone can submit to his will without hesitation. He accidentally uses this on her and tells her to kill all the Japanese. Unable to deny this request, Euphemia goes on a killing spree and orders her soldiers to do the same. She ends up murdered by the hand of Zero as a way to stop her rampage. The scene is beautifully executed, and is crafted to show how Lelouch isn't as all-powerful as he's made out to be. This starts the downfall of the first season, and more importantly, the downfall of Lelouch. The death of Shirley Furnett is a massive one for the series, which hurts me because Studio Sunrise decided to remove it from the compilation movies. After discovering the secrets of Lelouch's Geass, one of his best friends and love interest, Shirley, is killed by his subordinate Rollo to prevent his secret from getting out. The scene is so touching. We see Lelouch at the most human he's ever been, even trying so hard to use his Geass to try and bring her back to life. The tears in his eyes as Shirley gives a monologue is absolutely painful to watch and truly hurts to see. The scene is a pivot for Lelouch's stable mindset, as he goes on a mad rampage to avenge her. The fact that most of the events that happen in the second season stem from this scene makes it harder to believe it was removed from the movies. The last of the scenes I wish to talk about is one of the greatest written anime scenes of all time. That is the death of Lelouch v Britannia. The Zero Requiem plan was something planned by Lelouch since the beginning of the series, or at least since he realized what he could do with the Geass powers. After becoming the Emperor of Britannia, Lelouch is killed by Suzaku, so according to his plan. Suzaku has to take up the position of Zero for the rest of his life and creates a free new world for people. He changed the world by destroying it, ultimately saved everyone without having to forge any more wars. The impact of the scene is powerful, from the soundtrack playing to the stellar voice acting, both from the English and Japanese voice actors. This final scene is regarded as one of the best because of the closure it gives fans of the show. It truly wraps up the story of Lelouch v Britannia. Code Geass is an anime work of art. The reason I compared it to Death Note was because of its similarities. However, I think the main difference between Lelouch and Light are how human they are, and that's what makes Code Geass an overall better series in general. The execution at every point is masterfully directed by Goro Taniguchi over at Sunrise, and makes for a damn good time. The whole story is one long war arc, and I'm all for it. All hail Britannia.
I, Lelouch v Britannia, command you. Now all of you, die!
Happily, Your Highness! Fire!
That's been this video. I hope you enjoyed. It was so nice to finally make a video on a series that has a soundtrack on Spotify. Anyway, I hope this video gets you all to watch this masterpiece of a series. Once again, I've been the Black Reaper Kai, and this has been the beauty of Code Geass. 今も体中に